Well, it's time for Razovskyville again, and here we go. Um, Beautiful um, panel there, isn't it? So my name is Stuart Ross, and it's nice to be here again on the very third episode of Razovskyville, and I am here in the basement of where I live in Cobourg, Ontario, which was once part of a store here called Flamboyant Vintage Clothing, hence all the cool things I've got around here. It was a store owned and run by Carol Siblock, and I'm very happy to have this basement as the set for Razovskyville. Um, it's good to see you all. If a couple of you could maybe say hello, and then I know that I'm here and I'm live, and that would be really good. Um, I'm going to wait and see if that happens. We'll see. Okay, so I'm not seeing comments. Anyway, I'm just going to proceed as if I am actually on here. So, on the very first Razovskyville, I talked about and read you work that I wrote when I was like 15 years old. And it got published in a book called The Thing in Exile. And then in Razovskyville #2, I read work that I wrote in my late teens as I was influenced at the alternative school I went to. And I got till about age 20, 21, 22. And I got to sort of hover around that area. And I wasn't going to go chronological, but I decided I'm going to go chronological for a bit. Hi, all of you people saying hello. It's nice to see you. And thank you, Marie Erskine, for appraising the special effects with my sign. I really appreciate that. I would like to also dedicate this particular Razovskyville to a very, very dear friend of mine, a guy named Michael Dennis. He's a poet in Ottawa. And he was somebody who I met on the street when I was selling my books in the early 1980s. And we became really great friends and practically brothers. And this week, I want to mention that Michael has gotten his hands two new books. One is called Ghosts in a Japanese Taxi, and it's published by a Norwegian American micropress conglomerate called A Plus D. And it's written in English and in Norse. And he also, just this afternoon, got his first copies of Low Center of Gravity, which is from Anvil Press in Vancouver. So, congrats, Michael. So, where are we going to go from here? First thing, I'm just going to ask this: is that little thing about my tips? Is that visible where it says you could tip me? And I'm just going to go and make sure the cash register is working. It's not essential. It's not necessary. It's not even advised. But if you feel like it, that would be really cool. Okay, so if that thing isn't working, I'm just going to show you this right now. This is horrible. This is so crass, eh? There. Okay. So we were around 1981 before, and I'm going to back up slightly and talk about my street selling days. I met a guy named Crad Kolodny, who I probably mentioned last week, and I'm going to read a bit from my little memoir in progress here. It was around then that I met Crad Kolodny, the crazy fiction writer from Jamaica, New York, who published his own chapbooks of demented stories and sold them on Yonge Street. There was also a poet selling his work in the streets in those days, a guy named Don Garner, a nice fellow, but not a very good poet. I was inspired by Crad and Don to produce a more ambitious chapbook, that is, more ambitious than maybe I even read this section last week. I don't know. My little 12-pager, he counted his fingers, he counted his toes. So the result was Bad Glamour, which I read from last week, a collection of my poems and tiny stories. It was 36 pages long, and I went to a printer in Thornhill, a great old Hungarian guy named Leslie Steffler, who Crad had directed me to, and had 1,000 copies printed and saddle stitched. It was in the back of Bad Glamour that I first included the motto for my micropress, Proper Tales, be ace, be trendy. That was the beginning of the street-selling chapter of my literary life, which stretched through the 1980s and resulted in sales of about 7,000 chapbooks of poetry and fiction. I showed you a few chapbooks last week by Michael Boyce and Lillian Nechikov and Mark Laba. And those are some of the early ones I published, I think, in about 1982. And they all sold their books out in the street for a little while as well. Bad Glamour was followed by When Electrical Sockets Walked Like Men. Father the Cowboys Are Ready to Come Down from the Attic, my first novel, the unofficial winner of Pulp Press's 1979 3D novel contest. Skip and Biff Cling to the Radio, Wooden Rooster, my second novel. Bunny Baby, The Child with Magnificent Ears, and lots more. Selling my books in the streets also led me to a lot of unusual experiences and meetings with other writers who walked by. From the famous W.P. Kinsella, who was a prick, and Earl Birney and Peter Razovskyville, who were really gracious, to some unknowns who became friends, a teen writer named Dan Bradley, and a starting writer from Chicago named Richard Huddle, who was in Toronto on his honeymoon. Also another 1959er, J.W. Curry, who would become a huge influence on my small press publishing adventures. And that's also where I met Michael Dennis, who would become a lifelong friend, a brother. I loved being out on the street because I loved the idea of reaching people who otherwise would never see my writing. Most of the people who bought my books, I never saw them again. Some, though, became regular customers. Some had only read Robert Ludlum and Harold Robbins, and my work was the weirdest thing they'd ever encountered on the page. I liked that. And I just liked watching Toronto's rich and eclectic slice of the world walk by. I think I'm going to stop at that. That's just a little bit about what it was to sell on the street. I'm going to back up slightly from where I was in my publishing last week, because I skipped this, which was a neat little thing. It was a little mimeographed book from March 1982, a collaborative short story with my childhood friend Mark Laba. It's called Africa, A Tale of Moscow, and we printed it on a mimeograph machine in my dad's office. I think we did 125 copies, I think. So I'm just going to show you the cover of that. It's some beautiful art by Mark Laba there. Africa, Tale of Moscow. It's about a young Russian lad who goes to Africa to learn about how people live elsewhere in the world. And it has a little epigraph in the front from Boris Pasternak's Hamlet. Living is no country stroll. Okay, so what I thought I would do also, because I read you a little bit from Father the Cowboys Ready to Come Down from the Attic last week, a book that causes me great embarrassment and little bits of pride here and there. But I did three-day novels. And the next one I wrote, which I think was in 1980, was called Wooden Rooster. And by then I was really, really influenced by tons and tons of Latin American fiction, including Seven Serpents and Seven Moons. And the author, three-part name, I've forgotten at the moment, but you can look it up, and I really recommend it. Amazing. Okay, so the second book was called Wooden Rooster. It was written in 1980, but I didn't publish this Proper Tales book until, 1986? I'm going to read you the beginning of this. So, Wooden Rooster takes place in Central America. In 1980, this idea of cultural appropriation wasn't something that was in the air. And I'm just going to say that. Okay. Why, you lousy two-faced liar, you're going to pay for this. Put away that gun, Ed. Let's sit down and talk like bang, crack. Now I'll just clang, clang, empty the cash register, clang, clang, and be on my way. Thud, 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 slam. Oh, my, our pappy is dead. It was that bad man shot him. Stay away, darling. Stay away from your father. He was a fine druggist, but he'll be cold and clammy now. Oh, and his fingers are getting stiff. Oh, pappy, don't go away. Pedro reached forward and turned the knob. There was a soft click and the shortwave went dead. The four men sat around the table and stared at the old radio, old and battered, and they had no idea how it worked. They were all very quiet. Inside the radio, there was a silent, dying glow, a thin orange, dying glow. In the eyes of the men, there might have been a glow as well, but their eyes were sunk far back into the shadows of the sockets, the shadows of the skull. Working the fields all day just made their eyes sink back deep down. The shirts and pants they wore had once been white, and to the men their grimy clothes were still white. In the village and the poverty, standards of whiteness were declining. In a few years, black would be white. Outside of the shack, there were minute glows far above, stars in the black sky, black space with white holes punched in. In the space under the shack, small animals slept, curled together in the dark, damp heat. Heat against heat and stifling heat, cool tongues, damp eyes, whistling nostrils. Carlos Venom stepped out from the shack into the night. As on every other night, his body felt numb, numb from the day's work. He rotated his shoulders, pivoted on his hips, tensed and relaxed his legs. On his face, a smile began to form, a smile that pushed his mustache into his nose. Carlos closed his eyes, inhaling the warm air, sucking it far up into his head. I just want to know if I'm still on, because I've got something saying you're having trouble playing this video. Am I here still? I'm going to assume that I am still here. I certainly hope I am. Can someone just let me know? Can you see a picture still? All right. I'm just not able to see the video, I guess is what's happening. Anyway, yeah, so what happened here? Carlos closed his eyes, inhaling the warm air, sucking it far up into his head, holding it there an instant, then letting it escape naturally, gradually through his lips. This cleared his brain, cleared the dust and the sweat from his brain. Okay, so that was, I'm sorry, some distraction around here. Wooden Rooster. And oh, it's a drawing by me on the cover, by the way. Proper Tales Press, 1986. By the way, there's a little blurb on the back here from Jim Shedden from a zine he did called Scrick, and it's a review of Father the Cowboys Are Ready to Come Down from the Attic, the literary equivalent to a good Ramones album. That's pretty nice. Okay, next on the agenda here, I'm going to read, I wonder if I should stop this and start it again, because I'm worried that this isn't getting recorded. No, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to hope for the best. Okay. The next year I did another 3D novel. That would be in 1981, I think. And it was called Guided Missiles. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of it. I can't find the chapbook that it is part of. But once I'm just going to be back in 1 second. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. There was some environmental noise coming in. Seven Serpents and Seven Moons, Laurie tells me, is by Demetrio Aguilera Malta, by the way. And Maria Erskine remembers the line, "Trust the men with no skulls, trust them." So I'm going to read a bit, though, from Guided Missiles. And I couldn't find the chapbook this morning that I published it in. But I do have it in this book, Buying Cigarettes for the Dogs, which is much, much later. And it contains the book, the novel Guided Missiles. So I'm just going to jump to this one part where the hero, Archie Matanza, meets an evangelist out on the street. And this little chapter is called A Bit of a Scuffle. The crowd was larger than usual, and the prophet seemed more animated than Archie had ever seen him. Archie was sore and exhausted, but he couldn't find sleep. He'd run out of painkillers and just couldn't get comfortable. What bugged him most was that he had to do his second Holly Gully tonight, that's his radio show, and he didn't know where he'd find the strength. Excuse me. "I have counted my fingers," the prophet was bellowing, "and I have counted my toes. I have 10 of each. God has given me these appendages upon appendages so that I may work for him. The 10 toes at the end of my feet allow me to walk eternally for my Lord, that I may spread his word. The 10 fingers at the ends of my hands allow me to grasp these books, the books that give me strength, the books in which which are concentrated the very salvation of every one of you, miserable unbelievers. And with these fingers and with these toes I shall not stumble. I shall not tumble into the river nor the ravine. I shall not fall beneath the wheels of your filthy automobiles. I shall hold myself erect and pull my racked and pain-riddled body from city to city, spreading the word that he has entrusted unto me." There was a single amen from the crowd. For you are pigs. You are no better than pigs. Oink! I say oink! Do you understand me now, you sinful mud rollers? You are rabid dogs, and your illness must be eradicated, or else you will have to be eradicated. His voice dropped now, and a low breath of thunder ruptured the sky. There is a virus. The prophet stopped and was silent. He stared into the 24 pairs of eyes that were fastened to him. He rolled his shoulders slowly, dragging his dangling arms up and down his sides, grinding his fingertips into the worn covers of the black Bibles he clutched. There is a virus. The virus stands before me now, and I can see it. It is so vast that its shadow envelops the city, and its laughter is so loud that it mutes the screams of starving infants, and it is so ugly. The virus is so ugly that you would look upon it and think that it is beautiful. Which of you fuckers has read this book? He thundered, heaving the Bibles to the sidewalk in front of him, first one, then the other. And which of you fuckers has read the fucking TV guide? The prophet took a few violent, staggered steps forward and thrust out his right hand like a claw. Archie gagged as the hand tightened around his throat, pulled him to his knees, and knocked off his hat. Then the prophet grabbed Archie by the hair and fell to his knees in front of him. You. His hiss was little more than a whisper, his face just inches from Archie's. Are you the virus? Archie Matanza stared at the prophet, his bloodshot eyes expressionless, his teeth beginning to rattle. He felt his hair ripping out at the roots. The prophet looked up over Archie's head and took inventory of his audience. They too were silent. Everybody wanted suddenly to leave, but no one dared move. No one wanted to be the virus. The prophet loosened his grip on Archie's hair and began stroking Archie's face. The virus does not speak. Where is its deafening laughter? Where is the contempt that flows from the virus like lava retched from a volcano? This pathetic wastebin is not the virus. He launched himself to his feet. Who is the fucking virus? Now they fled. Like small birds startled by footsteps, they scattered in all directions, shaking their heads, rubbing warmth into their frozen veins. All of them except Archie Matanza. Archie fell forward and grabbed the prophet's bony ankles, bringing the man slamming to the pavement. Archie crawled along the prophet's body, and when he reached his head, he began to swing his fists. There was a soft thwack each time he struck the prophet's face, and Archie's frenzy grew by the second. You're the goddamn virus, you god-fucking son of a bitch. You're the goddamn virus. And there were hands on Archie's arm, a jacket over his head, the sounds of sirens. Again. Wow, I've forgotten quite how violent that was. But I was sort of amazed as I was flipping through that book for the first time in long time that was all about a virus. It was all about a virus. I think that was really inspired a lot by Flannery O'Connor. I saw the movie Wise Blood and then started reading some Flannery O'Connor, and I think I sort of ripped off the creepy preacher from Wise Blood. Let's just see if there's any little questions here that I need to answer. No, we're good. I'm gonna keep going. It's a bit of a show and tell going to be going on today. I found some. Okay. Here's the thing. I moved here to Coburg about 10 years ago, and there's a room right over there, and it's got about 50 or 60 of my boxes that I haven't even unpacked. And before that, they were in my little apartment on Witchcrest in Toronto, where they sat for 12 years. Not unpacked. So I'm finding all of this stuff from my past, little diaries and letters and all sorts of neat publications. So I've got some of that here. So the first time I ever got published in a book with a spine, perfect bound book, was in a book by Crad Kolodny, in fact. And I was asked by Virgo Press to write the preface to this collection, this first major collection of short stories by Crad Kolodny. The year was 1980. Virgo Press was an upstart press that ended up having some really amazing bestsellers for the few years it was in existence. It was started by a guy named Thad McElroy and another guy named Dean. I can't remember Dean's name. Anyway, here's one book that they did that was not a bestseller. What ended up happening was the bank called their loan and they went bankrupt with like 3 books on the paperback bestsellers list. Really sad. Anyway, this Lightning Struck My Dick by Crad Kolodny was my first appearance in in a book with a spine. Lightning struck my dick. It was a sneaky title because that's a phrase by a guy whose son's name is Richard and who was struck by lightning. So that was my first appearance in a book like that. Another thing I was doing back in those days, there was a magazine, a great arts and literary and cultural magazine run by the great Victor Coleman, and it was called Only Paper Today. And it had been going on for years, and I was a huge fan of it. I think I'd been in it a few times. It was tabloid thing, and it was there was amazing, amazing artists and writers and performance artists and stuff who were involved in it. Um, but I think some weird things happened, and Victor had to pass it along to other editors to take over it, and he gave it to me and a guy named Martin Avery, and we ended up doing 5 issues. It was a double issue and a triple issue. And this is the first issue that I was involved in. I was one of the editors with Martin Avery, OPT, Only Paper Today. And I hear someone saying that they've lost my sound, but Lynn, that's Lynn in Kingston. It's so great to see you here, and I hope you've got the sound back. Lori points out that my book with kids, with books by kids, also had a spine. So in fact, I lied about Lightning Struck My Dick. That was the second time I appeared in a spiny book. But Only Paper Today, there's some neat things in here. Opal Lewis Nations, one of my great small press heroes. A couple of high school friends in here, including Ashraf Dimitri, who was writing some great short stories, and Mark Lava's here. Sheila Gostick, the comedian, is in here. Martin Avery, Leslie McAllister, another great small presser and someone who I worked with at Now Magazine in the early 90s. I'm in here, and Brad Harley, the last interview of Crad Kolodny, a conversation with Roger Marin. And the Mark Lava thing is sort of a cool little comic strip there. I'm just going to give you a quick glance at that. So those are some of the things I was doing back in those days. I was pretty precocious because I was, when is this published? I was like 22 years old. In 1983, I published my first catalog from Proper Tales Press. I hope you can see it there. Proper Tales Press, January 1983 catalog. It was ridiculous. I had exactly 5 titles out with Proper Tales Press. The little cover graphic there is by Lillian Nechikov. And the character saying Mondo Hunkamuga, which was the little small press magazine that I was publishing in those days. A little bit more show and tell here. I did publish one book that got a huge amount of attention. I used to be a regular at a used bookstore on Harvard Street in Toronto called Nth Hand, and it was run by an amazing guy named Paul Stewie. Paul later moved to DuPont and Bathurst area. I can't remember if his store was still called Nth Hand over there. Anyway, one day I was in the store, and he mentioned that he had this book about Canadian literature, this really kick-ass book that took on the accepted, gods of Canadian literature. And he was getting rejected by every publisher in the country. And I said, well, I wonder if it could be a little Proper Tales Press book, I said, as I was walking out the door. And he said, hold on a second. And so that became the moment where I published probably the biggest Proper Tales Press book, 112-page perfect bound book called Clearing the Ground, English Canadian Literature After Survival. And I'm going to sneeze again for a moment here. Because I'm sneezing, it's probably a good time. It's probably a good time to don a mask so I don't and my droplets don't get you. This might be a flawed mask. It's not covering my mouth. Forget it. Okay. Clearing the Ground was really radical. It took on Margaret Atwood's big book at the time called Survival, which was a thematic study of Canadian literature. And Paul Stewie said that was bullshit. And the really great writers were great, not because of their themes, but because they wrote great sentences. And one of the other things he says, the last chapter, which got a lot of controversial response, was it was a call for Canadian bookstores to have Canadian content laws applied to them, just like radio and TV did. If Canadian bookstores had Canadian content laws applied, it would be this incredible boon in Canadian literature. thought Paul. That, of course, never happened. So that's another thing, a little show and tell. Okay, so I mentioned Crad Kolodny. In 1983, I think it was, I started publishing some postcards through my Proper Tales Press. And this is the first one by Crad Kolodny. I was really pleased. It was one of Crad's only poems ever. There'll be no more giant leeches when you find the good Lord Jesus. That was Proper Tales postcard number 1. And did some other ones here. Let's see, there's one by Lillian Nechikov. Here's one by a great friend of mine, Syndicated Press. Nice little one by Steve Enright, who I didn't meet him on the street, but I met him around that era, about 1980, and is a dear friend as well. This is a little poem called Not Even by Steve Enright. Not even these festive pigeons which scuttle along on their plaster bellies, blown by the wind at the foot of my deathbed. It's from 1988. Here's one from me from 1987, actually. It's called Yikes! My nose! It's in the garbage, and everything's oozing from this hole in my face. Here's a poem by Randall Brock, and a poem by Greg Evison called 12. 12 bold monkeys got caught putting orange peels in the toilet. Okay, so I'm just flipping through a little here and seeing if I need to answer any question. Oh my gosh, Karin from Austria is there. That is so amazing to see. I met Karin in 2018 in Slovenia. We were both at the same Writers Festival. Oh my gosh, Karin, how wonderful. Thank you for being here. So I experimented a little bit with the chapbook format, and in 1985, I did this little chapbook called The Pod Poems. And I called it that because I probably told you last week about Opal Lewis Nations, one of my small press heroes and the editor of Strange Feces magazine and Strange Feces Press. I traveled down and stayed with him for a little while in 1980 or 81 in Berkeley, in Oakland, California. And he was really amused that I used to go to the store and buy these like bags of peas in the pod, and I would sit there eating peas in the pod. I don't know why he thought that was a big thing, but he started calling me Pods, and then Pods. He's a British guy, so hey there, Podsy, and called me Pods and Podsies. A couple times he called me Legume. In fact, he got in touch with me a few years ago and addressed his note to Podsy. So I wrote this thing called the Pod Poems, and I dedicated it to Opal and his wife Ellen. I think I'll read this. I haven't read this in so long. I was really proud of it. It's one of the first multi-part poems I'd ever read. 1. We were standing in the hurricane's eye. When it died down, there was a pod between my teeth. Dig that crazy pod, you said. 2. When I sat at the typewriter, it hovered just in front of my forehead. When it hit just the right angle, I could hear the flamingos sing Red Sails in the Sunset. 3. The guy was lying in the street, surrounded by people, just staring. I felt in my pocket. The pod was quivering. 4. I woke up to a strange and rapid tapping, green against white linoleum. It was throwing a fit on the kitchen floor. I threw a hand towel over it and held it down, lest it injure itself. 5. One evening, we tried to photograph it while I typed. When we picked up the prints, we had a marvelous shot of the flamingos. 6. For 3 days, the pod went missing. I pored through the newspapers. Was it connected with the mysterious murders? When the pod returned, it was tired. I had no doubt of its innocence. 7. When I read aloud from the German poets The pod was radiant. Those nights it threw no fits and slept greenly. Part 8. I arrived home once. It lay on a plate on the table. I sat down before it. It was motionless. At last I lifted the pod and slid it with my thumbnail. With a forefinger I scooped out the peas. They were still in my palm. 9. He bent forward and peered into my eyes, pressing firmly on my chest. I've been blue all day, I said. That was the pod poems. I'd probably written when I was about 25 years old, I think. Right around that time, I was hanging out a lot with J.W. Curry, who was one of Canada's greatest small press publishers. And in July 1985, he published this little sort of, what do you call this? I guess it's a tiny chapbook. It's not quite a leaflet because it's got inner pages. Anyway, it's called Plasma. And the cover is rubber stamped and silk screened. And it has two little wiggly eyes on it. I don't know if you can see it. Plasma. Trying to make the eyes wiggle there. Okay, so yeah, that's Plasma. And I'll read this one too because I don't even remember at all what it was about or anything. And it's 4 parts as well, very short, and they're rubber stamped. I'll just show you a bit of that nice rubber stamp work. 1. In the snow, he huddled, and it was quiet. He felt warm, and he was happy. I am a grape, he said. 2. Listen, I'm not as content as it might seem. I have a kid, a dog, a mortgage, and mirrors on the bedroom ceiling. Put that in your pipe and... 3. If only, he yearned. If only. 4. The people next to her coughed and she fell right asleep. The plane landed safely. Okay. I'm just over a half hour, so I don't want to go too much further. So let's go do some really quick things that I'm going to show you. This was another thing that J.W. Curry published through his curved hands. It's a little postcard of mine with as one of my rare graphic postcards. It's called Grief. So maybe you can see it there. I don't know. And then in 1986, I started doing my first Proper Tales seasonal cards. That was the first one. Seasoned Cretins. Best wishes to friends of Proper Tales, December 1996. And I sent those out to a lot of people. And 2 years later, Healthy, Happy, and Strange 1988. Bunny Baby, Jackson Harmful, Carlos Venom, Nero Wentworth, Kruger, and the rest of the wacky gang at Proper Tales Press wish you a happy, healthy, and strange 1988. And soon that turned into poems that I would send out. I would send out annually. I'd write a poem every January the 1st, I think starting around 1990. And I still do that to this day. But for the first 10 or 15 years, I would mail them. I would mail poems out to probably up to 100 or 200 people, little leaflets or postcards I would print. And then I started sending them out by email. And by the way, if you want to be on my list for my New Year's poems, every January 1st, you get a poem that I write on that day and mail out that day. You can write me at razovsky@gmail.com, razovsky@gmail.com. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them down. And in the meantime, I'll just talk a little bit more. I didn't get as far as I thought I would. I'm really proud of this book. It was a book of poetry. Came out in 1988, so I guess I'm getting towards 30 years old there. Called Bunny Baby, the Child with Magnificent Ears. And I was reading one of those tabloid magazines. I think it was called Weekly World News, and it had an article about a little child in Australia or something who was born with whiskers and really long ears, and it was because his mother ate too many carrots during her pregnancy. So I wrote a little opera, really, and called Bunny Baby, the Child with Magnificent Ears. And I think I might set that up as a Zoom performance. So I'm not going to read from that, but I'll read a poem from here. Sonnet. John is turning green. Will he puke? That's the big question around here. There's not too much else going on. Yesterday I mailed you a letter, but now I realize I forgot to address the envelope. If you get it, we know there's a God. John's writhing now. He's on his belly. Do you think it was something he ate? Stop that wiggling, John. You're creasing my concentration. And there's various other things in here. And I would spend a bit more time on it, but I'm going to move on a little more quickly. Any questions popping up here? No? Okay, good. I'll just keep talking for another 10 minutes probably. I tend to do about 45 or 50 minutes on these Razovsky sessions. This is a book that was a little chap book, published in 1989, so I was 30. It's called Ladies and Gentlemen, Mr. Ron Paget, with a hand-drawn cover by me. I was really obsessed with the poet Ron Paget. As I mentioned to you, I discovered him when I was a teenager, around the time I met discovered Dave McFadden as well. And so I wrote this poem, this long poem, which was like a fantasy about meeting Ron Paget. And then I sent Ron Paget a copy of it. And Ron Paget sent me back a postcard that said, it was our first ever communication. It said, "Dear Stuart Ross, best book I ever read." Excuse me. Sincerely, Ron Paget. Okay, I'm going to read you a little bit of this. Just 2 sections from this, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ron Paget. Sitting there late at night in the empty subway car, Ron, I was reading your stuff, reading 100,000 Fleeing Hilda, reading Bean Spasms, reading the translations, Triangles in the Afternoon, Toujours L'amour, reading Tulsa Kid. Ron, I read Great Balls of Fire. And it depressed me in the end, because I wished I had written all that, and I began to sweat, fell to my knees, and dashed my head on the subway floor, cursing, "Damn!" thud. "Damn!" thud. "Damn!" And one more here. This is called Giving Ron the Business. I should mention that my dear friend, Ben Walker, who is a fantastic England-born, been living in Toronto for the last 15 years or so, or 10 years, whatever, 10 years. He's a great singer-songwriter. And he did a CD of 15 of my poems turned into songs, and one of them is based on that. And you can find it on YouTube. A performance of him on a really crappy piano, which is all my fault that he had just a crappy piano. If you search for Ben Walker, Ron Paget, I think it'll probably come up on YouTube. It's a great song. Here's this poem. We've never met, me and Ron. Just thought I'd throw this in so people don't get the wrong idea like that we're chums from way back when. I'm not saying we've never met, because maybe once it was Ron who asked me directions, or Ron who stepped on my toe on the bus. If he's been to Toronto, it's possible, because I do get around. Okay, let's pretend I'm meeting Ron. We'll meet at Toby's Hamburgers by the corner of my street. Hi, Ron, is this okay? Hi, Stu, let's move to smoking. Oh, Ron, I didn't know. Then the waitress comes up. She knows me since I'm in there a lot. This is my friend Ron. I wrote a book about him, and he called me up, and now he came to visit Toronto, and we're getting together. The waitress nods. He's a poet, I continue, pretty big in the States. There was a whole issue of Strange Feces devoted just to him. He's collaborated with Joe Brainerd and Ted Berrigan and Jim Dine and Tom Veitch. The waitress says, "What about Tom Clark?" "Tom Clark," I say, "that one I don't really know. You'd have to ask him yourself. What about it, Ron?" But Ron's not really there. It's just hypothetical. We'd sit and I'd razz him, slap him on the shoulder, give him the business about the whole American scene. I'd say, "Heh," when I was facetious so as not to offend him. Those Americans are touchy, you know. Ron would have the popularity which has mushrooms, and I'd get the truck stop, your basic banquet burger. He'd offer to pay, and then I'd say, "No, let me take it," and then find that I left my wallet at home. The waitress would say, "Don't worry about it. This is Mr. Ron Paget." And everybody turned their heads. So Ron said he really liked that, and he liked the song a lot too. And I'm going to do a little bit more show and tell because I don't see any questions. So here we go. Mark Lab and I, as I mentioned, started doing sound poetry together when we were teenagers. In 1988, I believe it was, Mark and I performed at the Toronto Mini Festival of Sound Poetry, which was organized and hosted by, whoops, I dropped something, by BP Nickel. And Mark and I did our first really big um, performance there. And out of it came this thing. I wish I could play it. This cassette tape, which is called "Preacher Explodes During Sermon," and it's got all the sound poetry on it. On one side of it's all the sound poetry, and on the other side, including such of our famous sound poems such as "Woeful Chicken Seller Meets Shakespeare" and Jacques Cousteau and the Amazing Wonderful Sea Monkeys, and I'm a Simple Sort of Guy disco remix. And then on the other side is a fake interview, which was I was the I was the interviewer. It was like a radio interview done on stage, and I was the interviewer. I can't remember what my name was, but and Mark Laba was, I think, Mark Laba, and it was a show called "The Word Hits You in the Head Like a Large Boot." So that was like a half-hour interview we did improvisationally, and it's absolutely brilliant. And I hope to digitize it someday. Um, okay, what do we else we have here? Oh, Laurie mentions that there's a cassette player right there, but I'm suspecting that it's not going to be a really good sound on that. There's something really weird out the window back there. And I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, it's like the back of a little head. I think it's a little doll. It's freaking me out right now. There's a little window up there. Maybe it's looking in. Maybe it's, I don't know. I'm freaked out. Okay. Honestly, it's so strange. Okay, I'm not going to turn around because I can't see what you can see, so I don't want to script the camera too much. 1988, I was still doing Mondo Hunkamuga, a Journal of Small Press Reviews, and this was issue number 6, and it has all sorts of great stuff in it. An interview with David Lee, who took over Blue Ointment Press from Bill Bissett, and Nicholas Power, and F.A. Nettlebeck from the States, and book reviews, and Carl Jurgens reviewed, and all sorts of things. So that was that. And then I had this little publication called El Tipo, the guy. It's a little leaflet. I'm a little confused about this. It came out in edition of 20 copies in 1990, published in Managua, Nicaragua, on the 12th of January of that year. And I'm confused because it's obviously my drawing, and I put this together. It's in Spanish and English, and it says that A Scenario Press on the back, though it really looks like a Proper Tales thing to me. A Scenario Press was a really little press called run by a guy named Joe Sullivan. He did some great things, like he published poems on the bottoms of running shoes and stuck them in grilled cheese sandwiches and stuff. Is it a kid looking in? I think I'm so disturbed by that. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can. I'm gonna show you. Can you see it? Can you see that out there, out the window? I don't know. It's Telly Savalas, says Laurie. So I'm thinking I know what that is and who put it there. I'm gonna try and put this back, and you can just let me know if I got it in the right position. I'm just gonna talk for about another. I'm not gonna talk. I'm just gonna be here for another 5 minutes. So, any little questions? Okay. Um, it's a Facebook moderator, says Nick Selig. Yeah, it's a Facebook moderator out there. The more reviewers, the better. Okay, so I'm just checking back to see if I missed anything here. Okay. Oh, he's been there for a while. Everyone saw him. Wow, that's really, really freaky. Shannon Sibilaka, I think you must be responsible for this. That's what I'm thinking. If there's no questions, I'm gonna. Steve Enright says, "I didn't know this would be so scary." I'm just gonna read a really tiny short story by me. This is my first ever chapbook that was all short stories, published in 1991. So this is around the time I was just starting to work for Harlequin. I worked for Harlequin for 3.5 years. I read 200 Harlequin romance novels. Mr. Style, that's me. And okay, Christopher Lee Dunning, great artist in Ottawa, says it moved. I'm freaking out. Okay, very short story called The Tin Can. It's only one page. Don't worry. I hold an empty tin can in my left hand. There is a thin string attached to the unopened end. I look far into the distance and see that a child holds another tin can at the other end of the string. Stunned, I drop the can to the pavement. The child looks up at me. He places his tin can at his mouth, and although I can see that he is speaking, I cannot hear him from this distance. I look at the tin can on the ground in front of me and then back at the child. I lift the can up again and put it to my mouth. After a few moments, I try putting it to my ear. I hear a sort of whispering and look again at the distant child. I close my eyes and forget where I am. I hear a voice in my ear. Its tone is soft but insistent. After some moments of straining, I begin to make out some of the words. Limping along, tender Jesus, right in the head so that don't believe. The voice becomes a sort of hum which disappears somewhere in the very back of my skull. I begin to feel as if I'm floating, that I am very high up, suspended in midair. In a sudden panic, I yank my eyes open. I am firmly anchored to the ground, and I hold an aardvark to my left ear. I am in a cemetery, and a few feet from me stands a small schoolboy made of stone. The shadow on his face from a nearby tree gives the illusion that he is winking at me. There's a small dot crawling across the statue's face. It must be an ant, I think to myself. The aardvark, alerted, thrusts its tongue deep into my ear. So that was a little story from Mr. Style. That's me again. I'm really proud of that cover. It's a little collagey. It's a graphic from a judo instruction book, and then a little background horizon that I put in. Thank you very much, Melissa, for your comment about enjoying my storytelling and my poems. I really appreciate that. At some point, Alice Burdick out in Nova Scotia said it's 3 Brussels sprouts, but I don't know at all what she was referring to. And maybe, no, it can be that. I don't know. I'm just going to tell you about one more thing before I sign off. And I'm going to read you one more poem, okay? And then we'll be done. So I started a magazine in 1991 called Who Torched Rancho Diablo. When I worked at Harlequin, there was a book that I edited called Rancho Diablo. I've got it somewhere here. I kept that one. And so I did a little literary magazine called Who Torched Rancho Diablo. Just listen to how many amazing people in here. Mark Laba, Opal Lewis Nations, Nicholas Power, a collage, Clint Burnham, Liz Dixon. Liz Dixon was a great singer, a lovely person. Gary Barwin, very nice little graphic. Kevin Connolly, 3 poems by him. Patricia Seaman, this crazy comics strip story there. Who else is in here? Steve Enright, Vula Anastakis, Tony Burgess, and Lynn Crosby is in here, and Jill Adamson, and on the back, Jim Smith. So there were, I don't know, probably about 20 or something issues of that. Here's one from a couple of years later. It went small and became only 1 sheet. In fact, I was thinking maybe I would revive Who Torched Rancho Diablo. Carol Siblock says there's dust bunnies in that flamboyant basement. Can you actually see dust bunnies from here? That's really freaking me out. Okay, so I'm going to end off with one poem. And I really appreciate you being here. I am so grateful. And if there's anything you want to hear about or anything, just drop me a note, like in the future Razovskyvilles. That would be amazing. Okay, so I had this one poem that was like this, like super popular poem that I wrote, and it was called Little Black Train. I wrote it in Florida in 1990 on my way back from Central America, and then it came out in this chapbook here, my cover drawing called Little Black Train. Just give me a little scan of that. Okay, so this was the big poem that I would read all the time, and it was like it became my Jumpin' Jack Flash, and I'm so goddamn sick of it. But I'm happy to read it again right now. I'm just gonna back up a little. Little Black Train. Anything I need to tell you about this? I don't think so. Again, I'm just gonna say thank you so much. And oh, Corinne has to go now because she has an appointment with a tax advisor at 9 o'clock. It's good to see you. Best to you and Taha. And thank you to everyone who is on here. And I wish I could just like address all of you, but thanks. And thank you, Ali Fleming. Thank you, Ali Fleming, for being here. Little Black Train. Waiter, there's an alligator in my eye, and Christ, I need a shave. The way people look at me, I mean, I know I'm pale, got these rings under my eyes, my whole face is tense. Looks like I haven't slept in a week, but I have, really. I'm waiting for something, but every time I look at my watch to see if it's late, I have no watch. And my bare wrist winks up at me, sends me a kiss, says, buy me a watch, big boy, make me pretty like all the other wrists. Pretend I'm rich, real rich. I have a heated swimming pool right in my living room. Hard to believe, but it's true. I walk right up to the edge and drop all my clothes right there in my living room. Outside, it's snowing. I can see through my huge picture window through which my neighbors all watch me in awe. Look at him, honey, they say, a picture of splendor and right in his own living room. I jump in and the water doesn't even ripple, doesn't splash up onto the carpet, and then I'm going under, gliding along the bottom of the pool in my living room, back and forth, around and around, doing these little acrobatic flips when I get to each end. I don't need to come up for air for 5 minutes or so, and when I do, I see there's a crowd at my window, and before I go under again, I hear them yell, jump, jump, jump. And I realized, Jesus, I'm not in a swimming pool. I'm on the ledge of a 10-story building, right in my own living room. Oh, and below, way the hell down there, there's so much traffic and it's raining. And I see my grade 6 teacher, Mrs. Sibbald, walk by. Mrs. Sibbald, I call, Mrs. Sibbald. And she stops and looks up and puts her hand to her mouth. I remember you, she yells up over the din of the honking horns and my neighbors calling, jump, jump, jump. You were a clever boy, she yells up, but you didn't have a mind for science. Do you still see that Sidney Radomski? I once saw a cloud that looked like his shape, I yell back. My doorbell rings, and it is the postman, of course. Mister, do you know it's nearly 2 in the morning, I say? And he hands me a box tied with string and says, sign here, and says, you look like you could use a little sleep. And I sign, and I say, yeah, well, here you are coming here at 2 a.m. And I close the door and untie the box and lift the lid, and this boxing glove pops out and punches me right in the nose. And I open the box again, and this boxing glove pops out and punches me right in the nose. And I open the box again, and this boxing glove pops out and punches me right in the nose. This is it, I say. This is the human condition. This is what it all boils down to. This is the bread and butter. This is the nuts and bolts. This is the crime and punishment. This is the Tom and Jerry. And there's a pounding on the wall that shakes the ashtray on my head, and my neighbor's voice at 2 in the morning. People trying to sleep in here. People got jobs, you know. I go to the wall and pound with my fist. How the fuck do you expect to sleep if you're yelling and pounding on the wall? But we love each other, my neighbor and I, and his kids, Mary Astor and Dick Powell, named after movie stars you are too young to remember. And tomorrow all will be forgotten, and we will lend each other power tools. And he will ask me why I have an ashtray on my head. Oh, wait, I lied back there. I am wearing a watch. Well, I didn't really lie, but it slid so far up my arm that I just found it now. Just found it through my shirt while I was feeling how my bicep was doing and thinking about Russian literature. I mean, I don't get much exercise. There's no denying that. I'm not trying to hide anything or steer you wrong. I plead guilty before the court of physical fitness, but I was thinking about Popeye and I was checking out my bicep, and there it was, like the parting of the Red Sea, like a miracle, like Jesus met the woman at the well, my watch right there up in my bicep, and you could have fooled me. I really had no idea. It's 4 in the afternoon and we have nothing at all to do, and I think Dick Van Dyke is on. Pull up a chair while I go shave. Thank you all again so much. If you want to join me again next week at 7:15 Eastern Time, I will be here on Facebook. I appreciate it. Do not touch your face. Take care.